Hello friends, subscribe my channel to get latest video update and tap the like button.
Dear students, I am going to explain about diuretics. As I explained before the diuretics, that how you can prepare your notes. So the same thing we will apply here also. So for diuretics topic, first we will write about the introduction part of diuretics. In that introduction, first we will write definition. So what is diuretics? So diuretics are the drugs that promote the output of urine by kidney to excrete out salt and water. So this is the definition of diuretics. Diuretics are the drugs that promote the output of urine by the kidney to excrete out salt and water. Means they will increase the production of. So now the question arises, the urine formation takes place in liver, but these drugs affecting the kidney. So how it is possible? Because if we are saying that it increases the production of urine, but the urine formation takes place in liver and this drug is affecting kidney. So how we can increase the urine formation? So the answer is that in kidney the filtration takes place through nephrons. As we all know that nephrons are the functional unit of kidney. In kidney, the filtration and the reabsorption of salt and water takes place. So when the salt and the water, they are reabsorbed in the body, then they will again go in the circulation in body fluid. But if the reabsorption is prevented, then they excrete out through the urinary bladder. So it means that if the reabsorption will be less for salt and water in the kidney, they will excrete out from our system. So that is why these diuretics drugs, they will affect the reabsorption of salt. So basically these diuretics, they will affect the reabsorption of salts in the body, in the kidney. So basically the urine formation takes place in liver, but the reabsorption of salt and water takes place in kidney. So basically when the reabsorption will be less, the more amount of water and salt will be excrete out from the urinary bladder through the kidney. So because of that, the large volume of urine will form. So obviously the urine formation will take place in liver, but the water and the salt that will filter out from the kidney and it will increase the volume of the urine. So that is why we say that drugs that promote the output of urine by kidney to excrete out salt and water are known as diuretics. In brief introduction about diuretics, here we can see that nephrons are the functional unit of kidney and all these diuretics drugs, they work on the nephron. So here you can see a rough diagram of nephron. In that, three sites are there, site 1, site 2 and site 3. At these sites different channels are there. Here different channels are there through which either ion they can pass or they can enter inside. So here through various channels the ion either they will pass inside the nephron or they will go outside the nephron. So here at site 1, 2 and 3 different channels are present. This is the collecting duct. So all these sites where these diuretic drugs are working. See here cortex and medulla. Some part is inside the medulla and some part is in cortex. So if the salts or the water which go in the cortex, that will reabsorb. If reabsorption takes place, means the fluid will enter again inside the body. And if it is entered inside the nephron through collecting duct, it will excrete out. So if the reabsorption of iron or the reabsorption of water will be prevented, so these all will enter inside the nephron and they can be excrete out. So basically these sites have specific channel through which the influx and outflux of iron and water will take place. Here you can see at various sites. So if the ions which is present inside the nephron, if they are here, they can easily excrete out. So but if they goes outside in the cortex, then the reabsorption will takes place and again they will enter in the body. So basically these diuretics, they affect these channels through which the entry or exit of iron or water takes place. So because of that, once the ions they will enter inside this nephron, then the ions they will be collected in the collecting duct and they will pass through the urethra. So basically the reabsorption inside the body will be prevented or it will be less. So these are the specific sites where the diuretics will work and they will prevent the reabsorption of electrolyte, salts and water in this cortex portion or medulla portion. So this is about the brief introduction that how these diuretics drugs they will work in the kidney. So here this is the glomerulus part where the blood veins along with salts and water they will come, and this Bowman capsule where the basically filtration takes place. Here the electrolytes and the water they will filter out, then the RBC and plasma they will again goes. So here the filtration takes place in Bowman capsule, and this is the PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. This is loop of Henle. This is distal convoluted tubule. So all these have specific channel through which the influx and outflux of the ion takes place, and they will be collected in the collecting duct. So here all these diuretics drug they will work. All the diuretics will work here. So at this specific site, these diuretics will either open the channel or they will close the channel for some time so that the outflux of ion will be prevented and they will be collected inside the collecting duct. So this is the just rough or you can say a brief introduction about that how the diuretics will work. Next, second component is the general use of diuretics. That why these diuretics were used. In case of hypertension, we use diuretics. In case of cardiac edema, in case of chronic liver failure, in case of kidney problems or accumulation of water inside the kidney, in these all cases, we generally use this diuretics. So the general purpose to use diuretics in hypertension, cardiac edema, chronic liver failure and kidney problems like glomerular nephritis or renal failure. So these are the condition in which mostly we prescribe the diuretics. So now our third component or the third part is the chemical classification of diuretics. So we are going to write the chemical classification of diuretics. Chemical classification. The drugs which are used as a diuretics are classified on the basis of their chemical structure. So here the first category on the basis of the chemical structure is number 1, thiazide derivatives, or they are also known as benzothiazide derivatives. So this is the first category in the chemical classification of diuretics, thiazide or benzothiazide. So let's take the examples of thiazide derivatives and benzothiazide derivatives. In the benzothiazide derivatives, first category is thiazides and the examples are thiazide and benzthiazide. See why these drugs they are thiazide or benzthiazide, because their chemical structure is related with the thiazide. So our first category is thiazide, benzothiazide or hydrothiazide derivatives. So in that the examples of thiazide derivatives are chlorothiazide and benzthiazide. So our first category is thiazide, benzthiazide or hydrothiazide derivative. These all three types of drugs they come under the thiazide category only. Means in this case the thiazide structure will be common. So thiazide, benzthiazide and hydrothiazide. The examples for first category for thiazides is, see the thiazide, benzothiazide or hydrothiazide. They are further classified into A thiazide derivatives, and the examples for thiazide derivatives are chlorothiazide and benzthiazide. So let's write the structures for the example of chlorothiazide. So this is the structure of chlorothiazide. So this is the structure of benzthiazide, and this is the structure of chlorothiazide, and they comes under the thiazide derivatives. So this is the first category, A, that is for thiazide derivatives. Next, B for hydrothiazide derivatives. This is the second category, or this is the second subcategory, thiazide derivatives. Example is hydrothiazide derivative. In that, again the example of hydrothiazide derivatives are hydrochlorothiazide, and another example is hydroflumethiazide. This is the second example. The first example for hydrothiazide derivatives is hydrochlorothiazide and hydroflumethiazide. So let's draw their structure. So this is the structure of hydrochlorothiazide, and this is the structure of hydroflumethiazide. So these are the example of hydrothiazide, hydrochlorothiazide, hydroflumethiazide. Another example for hydrothiazide derivatives are cyclothiazide. The structure for cyclothiazide is, so this is the structure of cyclothiazide. Another example of hydrothiazide derivative. Another example of hydrothiazide is bendroflumethiazide. Bendroflumethiazide is another example of hydrothiazide derivative. And the structure is, so this is the structure for bendroflumethiazide. So these are the examples of thiazide derivatives, bendothiazide derivatives, and hydrothiazide derivatives. So many other examples are also there: polythiazide, trichloromethiazide, and methylchlorothiazide. These all are examples of hydrothiazide derivatives. So this is the first category, thiazide derivatives or benzothiazide derivative. In chemical classification, next category is carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. So this is the next category. An example are acetazolamide and methazolamide. In carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, the examples are acetazolamide and methazolamide. So they are the example of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. So this is the structure of acetazolamide. Now we will draw the structure of methazolamide. So this is the structure of methazolamide. Acetazolamide and methazolamide, these are the example of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. Third category is loop diuretic. They are also known as high ceiling diuretics. They generally act on the loop of Henle present in the nephron. Example is furosemide. So this is the first example of loop or high ceiling diuretics, furosemide. Another example is bumetanide. Another example is ethiocyanic acid, torsemide. These are the examples of loop diuretics or high ceiling diuretics. So first we will write the structure of furosemide. So this is the structure of furosemide. Next structure is for bumetanide. So this is the structure of bumetanide. So this is the structure of torsemide. These are the examples come under loop diuretics or high ceiling diuretics. So we will discuss their mechanism of action one by one. But before that, we have to write the chemical classification. Next category is potassium sparing diuretic. Generally these diuretics, they conserve the concentration of potassium in the nephron. That is why they are known as potassium sparing diuretics. Means they will spare the potassium ion. They will try to conserve the potassium ion. The most common example is spironolactone. This spironolactone is also known as aldosterone antagonist. This spironolactone is also known as aldosterone antagonist, which antagonize the effect of aldosterone in the kidney. Another examples are amiloride hydrochloride, and the third example is triametrine. So these are the examples of potassium sparing diuretics in which spironolactone is aldosterone antagonist, amiloride hydrochloride, and triametrine. Let's write the chemical structure for amiloride hydrochloride. So this is the structure of amiloride hydrochloride. Next category is osmotic diuretics. These diuretics maintain the osmotic pressure. Examples of osmotic diuretics are mannitol, glycerol, and isosorbide dinitrate. These are the examples of osmotic diuretics. Another category is mercurial diuretics. So these are the next category, mercurial diuretics. Examples are mersaline, mercaptomerine sodium. So this is the chemical classification for diuretics derivatives. So now we are going to study about the structure activity relationship of diuretics drug. So we have already seen the chemical classification of diuretics. In that we saw that many chemical structures are common in different derivatives. So that is the backbone of structure activity relationship studies. See, if the structure is common, then there is a difference in the functional group around the various position. So how the alteration in the structure will affect the biological activity of the compound, that we are going to explain in the SAR study. Diuretics chapter, the two SARs are very important. One is SAR of thiazide derivative and another is SAR of carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. So as per the exam prospectus, I am going to explain both the SAR. First is SAR of thiazide derivative and the next is SAR of carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. So let's discuss first the SAR of thiazide derivatives. So here you can see this is the common structure which appear in most of the thiazide derivative. So first we had drawn the common structure which is present in thiazide derivative, and then we have assigned the number to these all position. So SO2 group, here it will get first position, the NH group will get the second position, then R third, and then fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. So now numbering is done. By the numbering we can easily identify the position of the functional group. So here one by one we will discuss about all the positions which is present in thiazide derivative and what are the possibilities to modify it or to introduce another functional group at this position, and how it will affect the biological activity of these thiazide derivatives. So let's start with the position 1. So in first position, the presence of SO2 group. This SO2 group is there. So the presence of SO2 group is important for diuretic activity. So that will be your first point. At first, group is important for diuretic activity. If you will replace this SO2 group, the activity will diminish, means it will completely lost. So that is our first point. The presence of SO2 group in thiazide derivatives will increase the diuretic activity. If it is replaced by any other functional group, then the activity will be lost. Now next go to the second position. At second position we can replace this hydrogen with methyl group. Means here previously hydrogen is present, now we can replace that hydrogen with methyl group. So if we will replace that hydrogen with methyl group, it will show diuretic activity. But if we will change this methyl group with C2H5 or any higher group, the activity will get decreased. So at second position we can replace the hydrogen with methyl, the diuretic activity will be there. But if we will replace that methyl with ethyl group or higher carbon chain, then the diuretic activity will decrease. So that is for second position. Now let's discuss the R. R is the third place where you can substitute hydrogen or any other higher functional group to increase the activity. Suppose if R is replaced by CH3 or aromatic group, then the activity will get increased, means the compound will show more diuretic activity if R will be replaced by CH3 or any other aromatic compound. Now next, the position between 3 and 4. If here a double bond will form or saturation will takes place. Means if the double bond will occur between the position 3 and 4, the diuretic activity increases. So if the double bond is introduced between third and fourth position, the diuretic activity will increase. Next, the position 5th and the position 8th, they should be remain unsubstituted. If any substitution is there, remember, if any substitution is there, the activity will diminish or it will not affect the diuretic activity. So position 5th and position 8th must remain unsubstituted. If they are substituted with any group, it will only decrease the activity or it will diminish the diuretic activity. So this position 5th and position 8th must remain unsubstituted. Now let's move to R1. R1 means 6th position. If any X or electron withdrawing group is substituted here, like chlorine, bromine, CF3, if these type of groups are introduced at 6th position or they will substituted as R1, then the diuretic activity will increase. So means at 6th position, if we will introduce chlorine, bromine or CF3 group, trifluorochloride group, then the diuretic activity will increase. Next, let's discuss the 7th position. The presence of sulfoamyl group SO2NH2 is compulsory. The presence of this SO2NH2 group is compulsory. If you will replace this SO2NH2 group, there is a complete diminishing of the activity. Means you cannot change this group with any other functional group. The sulfoamyl moiety is necessary for diuretic activity. So here in the SAR studies, you can see all the position have particular functional group, and these functional group, they play important role in the biological activity of the drugs. And if any alteration or substitution of these groups occur, either the activity is getting reduced, increased, or it is completely diminished, means completely lost. So here by modifying at certain position, we can study the biological effect. So if we will alter that functional group with any other functional group, the biological activities whether increasing or decreasing, that study is called SAR. So here we had discussed about the SAR of thiazide diuretics, that how the functional group they are present at different position and what is their significance and how we can replace it with some other functional groups. So this is the SAR for carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, and here you can see the structure of acetazolamide. So in this case, now we have assigned the positions also to various functional group, sulfur 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So total 5 sites are there where we can modify this structure. So at first position, the presence of sulfur group is there. It is necessary or compulsory for diuretic activity. If sulfur is replaced by oxygen or nitrogen, the activity will be lost. So here the presence of sulfur group is necessary for diuretic activity. So that is the first point. Next is the presence of sulfoamyl group at second position, that is SO2NH2 is important for diuretic activity. If you will replace this sulfonamide derivative or SO2NH2 group, this sulfoamyl group, the activity will diminish. So presence of SO2NH2 at second position is important. Now the position third and fourth, the nitrogen must be remain unsubstituted. If any substitution on these two nitrogen, the activity will get decreased. So that is for position third and fourth, the nitrogen must remain unsubstituted. Next, at position 5th, the presence of this methoxy group which is attached with this nitrogen is necessary for diuretic activity. So here the presence of this methoxy group with this nitrogen which is directly attached to this ring is important for diuretic activity. So this is the SAR of carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. So let's discuss the mechanism of action of thiazide derivatives. Means all the thiazide derivatives, they will follow the same mechanism of action. So here you can see this is the side 3. Side 3 means it is the portion of distal convoluted tubule. So here it is the rough diagram of one section of distal convoluted tubule. Here you can see this is the luminal membrane, in which you can see different channels are present here. First channel, second, third and fourth. These all channels through which the ion either they will enter inside the distal convoluted tubule or they will go outside and reabsorb in the cortex portion. So here you can see in first case this is the sodium chloride channel. So this is the channel number 1. Channel 1. Channel 1 is sodium chloride channel. So here you can see from this channel the sodium ion will enter inside the nephron. So this is the nephron. Okay. So sodium ion, it will enter inside through the sodium chloride channel. So here you can see sodium ion has entered inside the nephron portion of DCT, distal convoluted tubule, and also the chloride ion will take entry inside the convoluted tubule, inside the nephron portion. So here you can see again 3 channels are there. One is potassium channel. This is the potassium channel through which potassium can go outside from the DCT portion, and this is the sodium potassium ATPase channel. It will utilize the ATP molecule for opening and closing of the channel. So this is the sodium, this blue color channel, this is the sodium potassium ATPase channel which utilize the ATP molecule for the opening of this channel, means it consume the energy. Sodium, which is the sodium ion which is enter inside the DCT, will go outside from this channel, this sodium potassium ATPase channel. The amount of sodium which go outside the nephron, the same amount of potassium will enter through this channel to maintain the balance between these electrode, to maintain the balance between these ion, to maintain the electrode potential. See, to maintain the osmotic pressure, the amount of sodium which will go outside, the same amount of potassium ion will enter through this channel. So here you can say the sodium, it is leaving from this channel, and potassium which is entering inside this DCT. So here the sodium will go outside and potassium will enter inside. This is the potassium channel. Suppose if the concentration of potassium will be more, then through this potassium channel again this potassium will get reabsorbed. If it will not reabsorb, it will goes into the collecting duct. So the amount of sodium which go outside, the same amount of potassium will enter inside, and it can go through the potassium channel outside this DCT. And here you can see this is the chloride channel, another channel. This is the chloride channel. So the chlorine which is entering inside the DCT will go outside from this channel. So overall this ion influx and outflux will maintain the osmotic pressure. So here you can see through this channel the sodium and the chloride, they will enter inside the DCT. Through potassium sodium ATPase channel, here the potassium can enter inside the DCT, and through chloride channel the chlorine can leave this side 3. So basically our thiazide diuretics, they will inhibit this channel. Channel 1 will be inhibited by thiazide derivative. So thiazide derivatives, they will block this site 1 or this channel 1. Thiazide derivatives, they will block the channel 1. So if this channel 1 will block, no sodium and chloride can enter inside DCT, distal convoluted tubule. So if no ion can enter inside, then there will be loss of potassium and sodium chloride ion. So here thiazide derivatives, they will block the sodium chloride channel and they will prevent the reabsorption of sodium and the chloride. So they will make the loss of sodium and chloride ion. So this is the mechanism of thiazide derivative. It acts on site 3. It will affect the DCT, distal convoluted tubule, and it will close or block the channel 1, which is the sodium chloride channel, and it will prevent the reabsorption of salt, reabsorption of sodium and chloride ion. So there will be a loss of sodium and chloride ion. So this is the mechanism of action of thiazide derivatives. The sodium and the chloride channel, sodium chloride channel will be blocked and the reabsorption of salt will be prevented. So here you can see the synthesis of acetazolamide. In this, hydrazine hydrate react with ammonium thiocyanate to form 1,2-bis thiocarbamoyl. In the presence of phosphogene and cyclization process, here you can see the structure will form. After that, acylation process will take place and that acetyl group will add here in the place of one of the hydrogen on NH2 and NHC double bond O CH3, that is your acetyl group. It enters and here you can see chlorination along with oxidation takes place and this SH thio group will convert into SO2Cl and then amination process will take place and this Cl and one of the hydrogen, it will eliminated as HCl and SO2NH2 will form. So this is the structure of acetazolamide. So here you can see the synthesis of acetazolamide. This is the mechanism of action of carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. In our body, carbon dioxide and water is present. In the presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme, that carbon dioxide and water, it will form carbonic acid, that is H2CO3. And this carbonic acid will split into H plus and HCO3 minus. So these H plus ions which are liberated, they are exchanged with sodium ion inside the tubules. Means inside the tubule, the water will enter and the sodium will liberate. And this bicarbonate ion is reabsorbed in the body. So this is the normal procedure when no diuretics is there. So what is the mechanism for carbonic anhydrase inhibitor? That it will inhibit this enzyme. When this enzyme will be inhibited, the carbon dioxide and water, they will not convert into carbonic acid and this bicarbonate ions will not form, or whatever the carbonate ions are there, they will again combine with H plus 3 and carbonic acid will form. So ultimately these carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, they will conserve this bicarbonate ion formation. So we can say the accumulation of bicarbonate ion in the tubule will inhibit the exchange of sodium and hydrogen, right? So when this carbonic acid will not form, then there will be less availability of carbonate ions, this HCO3 and H plus. So now H plus is not available for sodium exchange in the tubule and this bicarbonate ion, it will conserve. So in this way, the accumulation of bicarbonate ion will block the exchange of H plus and the sodium ion. So it actually inhibit the sodium reabsorption in the tubule. So this bicarbonate and H plus ion will not form. So this H plus ion exchange with the sodium ion in tubule. So when this H plus ion is not available, the sodium exchange will not take place in tubule. So it will excrete out from the urine. So it prevents the reabsorption of sodium and bicarbonate ions in the tubule. So that is the mechanism of action of carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. So now what is the use of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors? Example is acetazolamide. So what is the pharmaceutical application or what is the medicinal use? So again, this carbonic anhydrase inhibitor are generally used for drug induced edema and it is used in drug induced edema. This is the medicinal use. Drug induced edema, congestive heart failure. Again, it is used in drug induced edema, congestive heart failure, and in petit mal epilepsy. So this is the use of carbonic anhydrase inhibitor drug. Example, in the synthesis you have seen the acetazolamide. So what is the medicinal use of acetazolamide or carbonic anhydrase inhibitor is drug induced edema, congestive heart failure, and in petit mal epilepsy, and it is also given in combination with other drugs in the treatment of hypertension also. Now this is the synthesis of chlorothiazide which come under the thiazide derivative. So here you can see three chloroaniline react with two molecule of chlorosulfonic acid, and there is an elimination of two water molecule. So one H, another H from here, and one oxygen, they will form one water molecule. So from both the side the two water molecules will be eliminated and the 3-chloroaniline 4,6-disulfonyl chloride will form. In second step, the amination process will take place, and here you can see NH3, the ammonia is there, NH3. So here amination process will take place and the minus 2HCl, two molecule of hydrochloric acid will be liberated. So one Cl and one H, they will form HCl, and other NH3 ammonia molecule again Cl. So here you can see SO2 and H2 group will form, the sulfonamide group will form on both the position. Next, in the presence of formic acid and heat, cyclization process will take place, and you can see SO2 here, SO2 and H1H and this CH2. Here you can see CH2 will form NH2. So here the cyclization process will take place and the formation of chlorothiazide will occur. So this is the synthesis of chlorothiazide, which is a thiazide derivative. Now what is the use of chlorothiazide derivative? Generally it is used, the medicinal use for chlorothiazide is, it is used in CHF, means congestive heart failure. It is also used in hypertension, CHF, congestive heart failure, hypertension, cardiac edema, and renal failure, So these are the medicinal use for the chlorothiazide derivative. So now what is the adverse effect? The adverse effect for thiazide derivatives are electrolyte imbalance, dry mouth, thirst, and hypotension. So adverse effects are dry mouth. So these are the adverse effect. This is the medicinal use and this is the adverse effect of chlorothiazide derivative. And this is the adverse effect for chlorothiazide. Basically this is the common use for all the thiazide derivatives, and this is the adverse effect which is common for all the thiazide derivatives. So if in examination it will ask about, write down the medicinal use and the adverse effect of thiazide derivatives, so you can write these medicinal use and the adverse effect. So here you can see the synthesis of high loop diuretic furosemide, in which 2,4-dichlorobenzoic acid, it react with chlorosulfonic acid, and the elimination of one water molecule will take place. Here you can see. Then amination process will take place, and then this SO2Cl will convert into SO2NH2, and here then it react with furfuryl amine to give furosemide as a product. So this is the synthesis of high loop diuretics. So what is the medicinal use of furosemide? It is used in hypertension, it is used in renal disease, cardiac edema, congestive heart failure. So these are some of the medicinal use of furosemide. What is the adverse effect for high loop diuretics or furosemide? That is electrolyte imbalance. This is the adverse effect, electrolyte imbalance. So the side effects or adverse effect of furosemide or the high loop diuretics are electrolyte imbalance, photosensitivity, and sometimes skin rashes. So this is the medicinal use: hypertension, renal disease, cardiac edema, and congestive heart failure. This is the adverse effect for high loop diuretics or high ceiling loop diuretics are electrolyte imbalance, photosensitivity, and skin rashes. So here you can see the mechanism of action of all the loop diuretics or the furosemide. So here you can see this is the structure of ascending loop of Henle, means inside the structure. So here you can see channels are here. This is the sodium potassium chloride co-transport channel, and this is the potassium channel. Here again potassium channel, and this is sodium potassium ATPase channel, and this is the chloride channel. See, through these channels the various ions, they will enter inside the loop of Henle or they will go outside. So the ions which go outside will get washed with urine, means which get reabsorbed, they will enter inside the body. Suppose if it is potassium ion, it is sodium chloride ion, when they will enter inside this nephron loop Henle, then they will reabsorb. Once the reabsorption will takes place, they will enter inside the body. So if the reabsorption of all these ions will be prevented, then they will excrete out from the urine. So here you can see the sodium, it will enter inside, and the potassium, it will enter inside. So to maintain the electrolyte balance, the same amount of chloride will excrete out from this chlorine channel. So means the amount of sodium positive ion will enter inside, it is maintained by, here you can see the potassium and the sodium ion. So let's discuss this in detail. So this is your sodium potassium chloride co-transport channel, through which the sodium ion, potassium ion, and the chloride ion, they will enter. So here if the potassium ion concentration will be more, it can easily go out through this potassium channel. To maintain the balance, this K has another route to go outside. Outside means here, if it will go outside, it will included in the water that will excrete out in the form of urine. So if the ions, they will go outside, means they will included in the urine and they will wash out. But the ions which enter inside the system, they will get reabsorbed and they will enter inside the body again. So here you can see, if chlorine amount is more, then it is balanced by this chloride channel. So the extra amount of chloride can be removed, or you can say the balance can be maintained by chlorine transfer from this chloride channel. Now this is the sodium potassium ATPase channel. So in sodium potassium ATPase channel, this channel will open only when it utilizes the one ATP molecule. So when this ATP is utilized, this sodium and potassium channel will open. So the sodium which is present in here will go outside, and the same amount of potassium will enter through this sodium potassium ATPase channel. So this is the channel, they are interlinked with each other, where the ion can enter or it can exit or it can go outside. So here in this premises, if the ions are present, then they will included in urine. So whatever ions they will enter inside will get reabsorbed in the body. So what is the function of loop diuretics or the furosemide? They will inhibit this sodium potassium chloride co-transport channel. So because of that, the sodium chloride and the potassium, they will not absorb or they will not reabsorb here in the loop of Henle. So because of that, they will include it in the urine or they will excrete out in urine. So this transport channel will be closed. So because of that, sodium chloride and potassium, they will not able to enter inside the loop of Henle. So because of that, they will excrete out along with the urine. So we can say that loop diuretics or high saline loop diuretics, example furosemide, it inhibits sodium potassium chloride channel to prevent the reabsorption of sodium chloride and potassium. So this is our mechanism of action of for high sealing loop diuretics. Next we are going to discuss the potassium sparing diuretics mechanism of action. So potassium sparing diuretics, they are generally conserve the concentration of potassium. That is why they are known as potassium sparing, means they will spare the potassium ions. So examples of potassium sparing diuretics are spironolactone, which is also aldosterone antagonist, and a second example is amiloride. These are the two examples that comes under potassium sparing diuretics. Okay, generally these potassium sparing diuretics, they are aldosterone antagonists, means they will antagonize the effect of aldosterone, and they also inhibit the sodium channel to prevent the reabsorption of sodium. So when they prevent the reabsorption of sodium channel, the sodium ion reabsorption will not take place in the body and it will excrete out through the urine. So if sodium will excrete out through the urine, to maintain the electrode potential, the K plus ion or the potassium ion will be conserved. So that is why they are known as potassium sparing diuretics, means indirectly they are retaining the potassium ion concentration in the body, because the sodium ion reabsorption will be inhibited, and to maintain the electrode potential, the K plus ions will be conserved. So this diuretics, they are indirectly conserving the potassium ions in the body. So that is why they are also known as potassium sparing diuretics. So now let's see the diagram that how these potassium sparing diuretics they will work. But before that, we will discuss about the use of potassium sparing diuretics and adverse effect of potassium sparing diuretics. So generally, what is the use of this potassium sparing diuretics? Potassium sparing diuretics are weak diuretics. They are used in hypertension, congestive heart failure, and during cirrhosis of liver, when liver is not functioning properly. And they are also used to counter the potassium ion loss in the body. If the potassium ion will lost in the body more, then we will give the potassium sparing diuretics. So these diuretics, they will conserve the concentration of potassium in the body. So these are the medicinal use of potassium sparing diuretics. Now what are the adverse effect of potassium sparing diuretics? The major side effect of adverse effect is nausea. That is the first major adverse effect of potassium sparing diuretics. Second is headache. So this is the second adverse effect of using potassium sparing diuretics. And third side effect is diarrhea. So these are the adverse effects and medicinal use of potassium sparing diuretics. So here you can see the rough diagram of distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct cell. Generally the potassium sparing diuretics, they work in DCT, distal convoluted tubule cell, and in collecting duct cell. So here you can see at one side the urine and other side is blood. So here reabsorption will take place and the ions, they will go to the blood. If there the excretion of ions will take place, then the ions will go in the urine. So this is the rough diagram. Here you can see this is the luminal membrane where different channels are present. So here you can see this is the sodium potassium channel through which sodium can enter and potassium can leave in the urine. So here you can see, here from urine the sodium ion can enter inside the DCT, distal convoluted tubule, and here the potassium ion can leave the DCT cell into urine through potassium channel. So that is the sodium potassium channel. Here sodium potassium ATPase channel. So this is Na plus K plus ATPase channel, this one, which utilize one ATP molecule to open this channel. So that is why it is ATP dependent channel. Okay. So in normal case, when there is no diuretics, so first I will explain what will happen, what is the general mechanism that how this aldosterone will work. See, aldosterone can cross the luminal membrane, right? So here aldosterone from blood, it cross the luminal membrane or it enter inside the DCT and collecting duct cell. So here you can see aldosterone indicated by the red color. It enter inside the cell of DCT and CD. So when this aldosterone will enter, it will bind with mineralocorticoid receptor. As we know that aldosterone is mineralocorticoid and it is a steroidal nucleus. So this aldosterone, it will bind with mineralocorticoid receptor and it utilize the ATP molecule for forming the complex. So here aldosterone and mineralocorticoid receptor, they form a complex. This is MRALD, mineralocorticoid receptor and aldosterone. So this is the normal mechanism. When this mineralocorticoid receptor and ALD, they will form a complex, then they synthesize AIP or they induce the formation of AIP. AIP is aldosterone induced protein. So when aldosterone form a complex with or it bind with mineralocorticoid receptor, they form aldosterone induced protein. That aldosterone induced protein will influence the sodium channel and it promote the sodium reabsorption and potassium secretion. Right? So here you can see this mineralocorticoid aldosterone complex. It will produce aldosterone induced protein. That aldosterone induced protein influence the sodium channel and it promote the sodium reabsorption in the blood. So here large amount of sodium will enter in the blood. So that is called the sodium reabsorption. So when the sodium reabsorption will be promoted or it will be increased, then to maintain the electrode potential, the large amount of potassium will go in urine, right? So sodium reabsorption will be promoted and the elimination of potassium will occur. See, this is the general case when aldosterone is working, when there is no diuretics. So in the absence of diuretics, the general mechanism is that this aldosterone induced protein, it influences the sodium channel to increase the sodium ion reabsorption in blood. So when the sodium reabsorption in blood will be more, the large amount of potassium will be excreted out. So here you can say sodium will enter in the blood and the potassium ion, it will go through this potassium channel into urine part. So that is the general mechanism when no diuretics is there. But when we use potassium sparing diuretic like spironolactone, and spironolactone is aldosterone antagonist, means it will antagonize the effect of aldosterone. So in that case, the aldosterone will bind with this mineralocorticoid receptor. Remember, when we use potassium sparing diuretics like spironolactone, that spironolactone will bind with this mineralocorticoid receptor. So once it bind with mineralocorticoid receptor, no mineralocorticoid receptor ALD complex will form, right? So when this complex will not form, the AIP, aldosterone induced protein, will not form. If this aldosterone induced protein will not form, it will not influence the sodium reabsorption in the body. So if the sodium reabsorption will be prevented, then the elimination of potassium will also be get reduced. So that is the mechanism when potassium sparing diuretics, they are used. Then these diuretics, they will bind with this mineralocorticoid receptor and they will prevent the formation of this aldosterone mineralocorticoid complex and this aldosterone induced protein. So indirectly, these potassium sparing diuretics, they influencing the sodium channel. When this mineralocorticoid receptor it bind with aldosterone antagonist, so it cannot form the AIP. So if AIP means aldosterone induced protein will not form, then it will not influence the sodium channel and the sodium reabsorption will be prevented. So if sodium reabsorption will be prevented in the blood, it can easily eliminate out in the urine through collecting dirt. So to maintain the electrode potential, the same amount of potassium ion will conserve in the body. So that is why they produce a potassium sparing diuretics, means indirectly they are conserving the concentration of potassium ion. So they will conserve potassium ion. So that is the mechanism for spironolactone. The spironolactone will bind with mineralocorticoid receptor, so the AIP formation will be prevented, and because of that the sodium reabsorption, the sodium ion reabsorption will not take place. Another thing, this mineralocorticoid receptor and aldosterone complex, they also help in synthesis of messenger RNA. That is their secondary function. Now the next, if we use amiloride as a diuretics, so amiloride will block this sodium channel. So here you can see amiloride will block this sodium channel and the sodium ions will not enter in the DCTN collecting duct. So because of that the sodium ion will get excreted. To maintain the electrode potential, the K plus or the potassium ions will be conserved. So amiloride will inhibit the sodium channel to prevent the sodium reabsorption. So indirectly it is conserving the potassium and H plus ion in the body. So this is the mechanism of action of potassium sparing diuretics. So in diuretics, our next topic is osmotic diuretics and their mechanism of action. So the examples of osmotic diuretics is mannitol and bristol. So the mechanism of action for osmotic diuretic is still not clear, but these are the certain mechanisms which are mentioned in the literature. So basically this osmotic diuretics, they retain the water and oppose the NaCl reabsorption, so that the NaCl can be excreted out through the urine. They also expand the extracellular fluid volume and they also increases the renal blood flow and they also increases the urinary volume. So these are the general mechanism of osmotic diuretics, and these osmotic diuretics generally they maintain the osmotic pressure in the fluid. So now what is the medicinal use of these osmotic diuretics? So these are the two important medicinal use of osmotic diuretics. First is to maintain the urine flow in case of acute renal failure, and second is to counter the osmotic pressure. See, during dialysis the osmotic pressure will get decreased. So to maintain that osmotic pressure in the fluid, these osmotic diuretics they are given. So now what are the adverse effect and side effect of these osmotic diuretics? The major side effect is headache. That is the major side effect or adverse effect. Second adverse effect is nausea. So headache, nausea and sometimes vomiting. So these are the adverse effect of osmotic diuretics: headache, nausea and vomiting. Dear students, I hope in this video you have learned about diuretics chapter. I try to cover the important topics which were asked in the examination. So if you like my video, then please subscribe the channel and share it with other students so that they will also get benefited by this video. Hope you like my video. Thank you.